Let me tell you something. The most dangerous person is not the one who knows how to hurt you. It is the one who knows exactly what deserves his attention and what does not. Think about that for a moment. How many people have controlled your mood without ever touching you? One message, one look, one comment, one person suddenly becoming distant. They did almost nothing physically, yet somehow they entered your mind, changed your emotional state, and stayed there for hours. That is the hidden cost of attention. The moment you give something your attention, you give it a piece of your life. And here's what makes this even more disturbing. Some people don't actually want to defeat you. They want access to you. They want your explanation, your anger, your defense, your jealousy, your desperate attempt to prove yourself. Because as long as they can make you react, they can still reach inside your emotional world whenever they want. But the moment you stop feeding the reaction, something changes. The conversation loses its fuel. The provocation loses its reward. And the person who was trying to pull you into their world suddenly discovers that the door is no longer opening. The Stoics understood that your mind is not a public square where every stranger gets to walk in and leave their opinion behind. Your attention is one of the most valuable things you possess, because whatever repeatedly receives your attention eventually receives your emotional energy, and whatever receives your emotional energy begins shaping your life. This is why ignoring is not always weakness. Sometimes ignoring is the highest form of psychological discipline. It is the decision to look directly at something and say, "You may exist, but you do not deserve a place inside me." But there is a dangerous misunderstanding here. The power of ignoring is not about pretending you don't care. It is not about giving someone the silent treatment, avoiding every uncomfortable truth, or becoming emotionally numb. It is about knowing the difference between what deserves your response and what is simply trying to steal your peace. And in this video, we're going to uncover 12 powerful principles that will show you how to master that difference, how to ignore provocation, rejection, unnecessary opinions, manipulation, disrespect, and even the desperate need to be understood, because the deeper you go, the more uncomfortable the truth becomes. Sometimes the person you need to ignore isn't the person trying to get your attention. It's the part of you that keeps begging for theirs. And once you understand that, ignoring stops being something you do to other people. It becomes something you do to protect the person you're becoming. Principle 1. Your attention is your most expensive currency. Every time you give something your attention, you are making an exchange. You are taking a piece of your limited life and handing it to whatever you are looking at, thinking about, worrying about, or obsessing over. Most people protect their money more carefully than they protect their attention, even though money can be earned again, while yesterday's attention can never be recovered. If someone can repeatedly occupy your mind without earning that privilege, they are taking something from you that you can never get back. Imagine carrying a small lantern through a dark city. You only have enough fuel to keep it burning for so long. So every time you stop and point it towards something, that thing becomes illuminated. Now imagine spending that fuel on every stranger, shouting from every street corner. One person insults you, so you shine the light on them. Another criticizes you, so you turn toward them. Someone ignores you, so you spend another hour staring into the darkness, trying to understand why. Eventually, the problem isn't that the city is too noisy. The problem is that you've forgotten your lantern was supposed to help you find your own way. This is why the practice of directing attention inward can be so powerful. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to return to the work immediately in front of him, to examine his own judgments, and to stop allowing external disturbances to dictate the quality of his inner life. Your attention is limited. Your time is limited. Your energy is limited. So stop giving unlimited access to things that provide nothing valuable in return. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every insult deserves an explanation. Not every rejection deserves hours of analysis. Not every person deserves a permanent position inside your thoughts. The moment you understand this, your life begins to become quieter. And when your mind becomes quieter, you can finally hear what actually matters. He understood something that modern life makes incredibly difficult. You cannot control everything that enters your awareness, but you can become selective about what receives your continued attention. Seeing something is automatic. Feeding it is a choice. So the next time someone says something designed to pull you toward them, don't immediately ask whether they're right or wrong. First, ask something more valuable. Is this worth my attention? Because not every false accusation deserves correction. Not every opinion deserves consideration. And not every person deserves access to your emotional energy. Sometimes the strongest response isn't proving that you are unaffected. It is quietly deciding that this particular thing will not receive another minute of your life. And once you understand the value of your attention, the next principle becomes even more powerful, because you'll realize that some people don't want your attention at all. They want your reaction. Principle 2. Starve the provocation and it dies. Some people are not looking for a conversation. They are looking for a reaction. They say the thing they know will irritate you. They delay the reply because they know you'll overthink it. They make a small insult and then watch to see whether you defend yourself. Their real reward is not the words they said. It is the emotional movement they can create inside you. The moment you understand that, you stop asking, how do I win this interaction? And start asking, why am I feeding it at all? Think of provocation like a fire built from attention. A spark by itself cannot burn through an entire house. It needs something to consume. Your anger becomes the fuel. Your explanations become the oxygen. Your repeated replies become the hands constantly feeding the flames. You think you're fighting the fire, but every emotional response is giving it another reason to stay alive. Sometimes the fastest way to defeat a provocation is not to extinguish it. It is to stop supplying it with anything that allows it to grow. This is where ignoring becomes fundamentally different from weakness. Weakness avoids a confrontation because it is afraid of what might happen. Disciplined ignoring sees the confrontation clearly and decides that participating would cost more than it is worth. You can recognize disrespect without becoming disrespectful. You can notice manipulation without exposing every thought in your head. You can hear an insult without turning it into a personal mission. Your silence is no longer an absence of courage. It becomes evidence that someone else's behavior does not automatically determine yours. And there is a deeper psychological shift that happens when you stop reacting. The person who was trying to provoke you is forced to face something they didn't expect. Their control was never inside their words. It was inside your participation, remove the participation, and suddenly the entire dynamic changes. They may try harder, they may become louder, they may accuse you of not caring, but that can be the final test. Because if you break your silence simply to prove that you don't care, you've still allowed them to choose your behavior. So the next time someone throws a verbal hook toward you, don't rush to bite it just because you can see it. Watch it fall. Let the moment become uncomfortable without rescuing it with your reaction. You don't have to destroy every invitation to conflict. Sometimes you become powerful simply by refusing to attend. And once you learn to starve other people's provocations, you'll be ready for something much harder. Learning to ignore the opinions that quietly control you, even when nobody is standing in front of you. Principle 3. Stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. There is a point where explaining yourself stops being communication and becomes self-abandonment. You explain why you said it, why you did it, what you actually meant, what they misunderstood, what happened before, what happened after, and still they find another accusation. At that moment, you're no longer trying to be understood. You're trying to obtain permission to feel innocent in someone else's eyes. And that is a dangerous place to live, because the moment your peace depends on another person's understanding, you have handed them authority over your emotional state. Imagine standing in front of a locked door, explaining yourself to someone who has already decided not to open it. You bring evidence, you bring memories, you bring sincerity. You explain every detail with increasing desperation, believing that if you just find the perfect sentence, they'll finally understand. But the door doesn't move because the problem was never your explanation. The person on the other side simply didn't want to understand, and no amount of clarity can force someone to receive what they have already chosen to reject. This is where the discipline of emotional detachment becomes extremely uncomfortable. You have to accept that sometimes your truth will not be accepted by everyone. You have to accept that some people will misunderstand you. Some will judge you without knowing the full story. Some will create their own version of events and refuse to change it. And your responsibility is not to control every person's opinion of you. Your responsibility is to live in a way that you can respect when you are alone with yourself. Explain yourself when clarification genuinely matters. Take responsibility when you are wrong. Apologize when you have caused harm. But do not spend your life chasing approval from people who have already decided what they want to believe. There is freedom in saying, I have explained enough. Not because you have nothing left to say, but because you finally understand that your peace cannot depend on being perfectly understood. The right people will listen. The right people will ask questions. The right people will allow context to exist. And when someone refuses all of that, you don't need to fight endlessly at a locked door. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step away, protect your energy, and continue walking forward. Because your life is too valuable to spend explaining yourself to people who are determined not to understand you. You can control the honesty of your words, but you cannot control the interpretation someone gives them. You can act with integrity, but you cannot force another person to recognize it. You can correct a misunderstanding once, perhaps twice, when something meaningful is at stake. But after that, continuing to defend yourself can become another form of attachment. You are no longer protecting your character. You're trying to manage their perception of your character. Those are two completely different responsibilities. Think about how much energy people waste trying to prove they are not the person someone else has decided they are. A friend misunderstands you, so you write paragraphs. A stranger criticizes you, so you defend your entire life. Someone leaves angry, so you chase them for closure. And beneath all of it is the same hidden hunger. Please see me correctly. But what happens when they never do? Do you spend the rest of your life presenting evidence? Or do you finally accept that your character can survive someone's misunderstanding of it? There is immense freedom in realizing that you don't need to win every person's interpretation of you. Let them misunderstand what they are determined to misunderstand. Let them tell a version of the story that makes sense to them. Your responsibility is not to control the narrative inside someone else's head. Your responsibility is to make sure your own behavior is worthy of the person you claim to be. And when you can walk away from a misunderstanding without desperately chasing correction, you discover a form of peace most people never experience. Because sometimes the strongest sentence you can say is nothing at all. Not because you have been defeated, but because you finally understand that your character does not become less true simply because someone refuses to see it. And once you stop begging to be understood, you become ready for an even deeper form of ignoring. Learning to live without needing everyone to approve of you. Principle 4. Stop chasing approval from people who withhold it. One of the hardest things to ignore is not an insult, but the feeling that someone doesn't value you. Rejection can make you do strange things. You become more available. You explain more. You give more. You check whether they've noticed. You start measuring your worth by the warmth in their voice, the speed of their reply, the invitation you received or the invitation you didn't receive. And without realizing it, you stop living according to your own values and start performing for an audience that may never applaud. Approval is powerful because it creates a hidden contract. If you like me, I will feel valuable. If you reject me, I will question myself. But that contract places your self-worth outside your control. Your character is something you can work on. Another person's opinion is something you can only observe. If your peace rises and falls according to someone else's approval, then you have turned their opinion into a remote control for your mind. Imagine building a house and then handing the keys to every person who walks past it. One person says the walls are beautiful, so you feel proud. Another says the house is ugly, so you start tearing it apart. Someone else dislikes the windows, so you replace them. Eventually, you are no longer building a home. You are building a structure designed by strangers. That is what happens when you constantly adjust yourself to other people's approval. You may become acceptable to everyone and completely unfamiliar to yourself. And this doesn't mean becoming arrogant or refusing all criticism. That's another form of weakness disguised as confidence. The disciplined person can listen without surrendering. If someone gives useful criticism, take the lesson. If someone points out a genuine flaw, correct it. But when the criticism is merely an attempt to reduce you, you don't have to crawl toward the person holding it and beg them to change their mind. You can examine the message without becoming dependent on the messenger. The real turning point comes when you can hear, "I don't like you," without translating it into, "There must be something wrong with me." When someone chooses another person, you can accept the choice, without turning it into a verdict on your worth. When someone walks away, you can let them walk without chasing them down the road, demanding an explanation that will make you feel whole again. You stop asking, how do I make them choose me? And you start asking, why would I abandon myself trying to be chosen? Because the deepest form of ignoring isn't ignoring another person's opinion. It is ignoring the desperate voice inside you that says you must be approved of to be worthy. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need everyone to like you. You don't need everyone to choose you. You need to know who you are, what you stand for, and what kind of person you are becoming. Once you stop outsourcing your worth to other people, their approval becomes a preference rather than a necessity. And that is when rejection loses much of its power over you, and when that voice finally becomes quieter, something remarkable happens. Rejection still hurts, but it no longer commands you. You can be disliked without becoming smaller, misunderstood without becoming desperate, and left without believing that you have abandoned yourself. And that prepares us for the next principle, because even after you stop chasing approval, there is still one thing capable of stealing your peace without saying a single word. Comparison Principle 5. Ignore the comparison that steals your peace. Comparison rarely announces itself as jealousy. It arrives disguised as curiosity. Why are they ahead? Why did they get chosen? Why do they have what I don't? Why does their life look easier? You open a screen for a few seconds, see someone else's success, relationship, body, money, confidence, or lifestyle, and suddenly your own life feels smaller. Nothing in your reality changed in that moment. Only the person you were measuring yourself against entered your mind, and somehow that was enough to make you feel behind. The deeper problem is that comparison creates a race you never consciously agreed to enter. You begin measuring your private life against someone else's public evidence. You compare your worst morning to their best photograph, your unfinished chapter to their polished result, your doubts to their confidence, your ordinary Tuesday to the highlight reel of their entire existence. Then you call the emotional pain motivation. But motivation says, I want to become better. Comparison says, I need to become better than them so I can finally feel worthy. One builds you, the other slowly consumes you. Your character is not automatically improved or diminished by another person's possessions, reputation, status, or success. What matters is what you do with your own life, your choices, your habits, your effort, and the person you are becoming. That principle becomes brutally relevant in a world where you can measure yourself against thousands of people before breakfast. The moment someone else's life becomes the measuring stick for your own, you have allowed a stranger to define the scoreboard. And you cannot win a game when someone else decides what counts as winning. There is also a darker side to comparison. Sometimes you don't actually want what the other person has. You want what you imagine having it would make you feel. You think you want their money, but maybe you want security. You think you want their popularity, but maybe you want recognition. You think you want their relationship, but maybe you want to feel chosen. And if you never separate the object from the emotion underneath it, you'll spend years chasing things that were never the real desire. You'll keep looking outward for a feeling that can only be built inward, so practice a different kind of ignoring. When someone else's success triggers that quiet feeling of inadequacy, don't attack them and don't attack yourself. Ignore the scoreboard. Ask instead, am I becoming stronger than I was? Am I keeping my promises to myself? Am I living according to principles I actually respect? Because your life was never supposed to be a competition against another person's timeline. Someone else's progress does not cancel yours. Someone else's success does not make you a failure. Someone else's beauty does not make you less valuable. Someone else's opportunity does not mean your opportunities are gone. And someone else's chapter does not determine the ending of yours. The moment you stop using someone else's life to measure your own, you get something comparison could never give you. The ability to see your own progress clearly. You begin noticing the habits you have built, the challenges you have survived, the discipline you have developed, and the small promises you are finally keeping. You stop asking, why am I not where they are? And you start asking, what can I build from where I am? That question changes everything, because peace does not come from becoming better than everyone around you. Peace comes from becoming more honest about the person you want to become. And yet comparison is only one kind of noise. There is another kind that is far more dangerous because it comes disguised as responsibility. It makes you believe that you must carry everything, fix everything, respond to everything, and solve every problem around you. And learning to ignore that pressure may be one of the most important forms of discipline you will ever develop. The power of ignoring is not about becoming cold, distant, or indifferent. It is about becoming intentional with your attention, your energy, and your peace. You cannot control every person, every opinion, every rejection, every provocation, or every comparison that enters your life. But you can decide what deserves a permanent place inside your mind. Your attention is limited, your time is limited, and your emotional energy is limited. Stop spending these precious resources on things that only leave you exhausted. You learn that not every provocation deserves a reaction. Sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. You learn that explaining yourself has a limit. If someone is committed to misunderstanding you, endless explanations will not create understanding. You learn that rejection does not have to become a judgment against your worth. Someone choosing not to value you does not mean you should stop valuing yourself. And you learn that comparison can quietly steal the peace you worked so hard to build. Someone else's success does not cancel your progress, and someone else's timeline does not determine yours. So from this moment forward, become more selective. Before you react, pause. Before you explain, ask whether it is necessary. Before you chase someone's approval, ask why their opinion has become so important to you. Before you compare your life to someone else's, return your attention to your own path. And when something tries to pull you into unnecessary conflict, remember that you do not have to attend every battle you are invited to. Real strength is not proving that you can respond to everything. Real strength is knowing what deserves your response and what deserves your silence. Protect your attention. Protect your peace. Protect the person you are becoming. Let people misunderstand you if they choose to. Let some opinions remain unanswered. Let some people walk away. Let some comparisons disappear without following them. You do not need to control the world around you to become powerful within yourself. The goal is not to ignore life. The goal is to ignore what keeps you from fully living it. And when you stop giving your energy to everything that demands it, you finally have enough energy for the things that truly deserve you. Your peace is not something other people should control. Your attention is not something everyone should have access to. And your worth is not something that needs to be approved by anyone. Choose carefully what you give your mind to. Choose carefully what you give your time to. And most importantly, choose carefully what you allow to shape the person you are becoming. Because sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is simply this. You see it, you understand it, and you decide that it no longer deserves your attention.